Hey guys, Welsknight here, and welcome back to another Minecraft video. Hope you guys are having an awesome day. I'm having a fantastic day, and I want to do a short little quick sort of building tips video today. We're going to talk about the importance of depth. So here we have sort of the front facade of like a building. Pretend it's going to be a house or something along those lines that you might see pretty commonly. People might build in this style. You've got spruce logs, oak planks, windows, spruce, sort of an interesting roof, etc. But all in all, it's kind of dull. You know, you've got some nice, you've got a decent block palette. These blocks all work well together. But if you look at it, it's just really flat. You've got the roof sticking out by one block. And maybe for the purposes of our video, we even get rid of that, right? Because we're talking about depth today. So maybe your build instead looks like this, right? There's your build. And it just doesn't look that good. What I want to talk about in this video is how you can take this build, or a build like this, and turn it into something that looks significantly better by playing around with depth. So look at this very closely, and now let's move on to build number 2. It's essentially the same build. The only difference is that I've taken these oak sections and pushed them back one block. I've replaced the spruce logs here with sort of dark oak slabs and stairs. And then I've taken the spruce sections here and pulled them forward one block. And this, oh, and I guess since we made that change to the roof, I also added trim on the roof, that an overhang on the roof that kind of sticks out. And you'll notice that this looks significantly better than this, but I really haven't changed much. It's basically the same build. I've just played around with the depth a little bit. So rather than a flat wall and a flat surface, we've got this, and this looks much better. You got kind of this nice overhang. You've got little bits that kind of jut back and forth. As a general rule of thumb, when you're playing with depth, you want to avoid having two textures that are different on the same level of depth. What do I mean by that? Well, very simple. You can tell that there is a significant difference between spruce logs and oak planks. These are on the same plane. They're on the same level of depth. And generally, that's what you want to avoid. Having those transitions between two textures on the same level of depth usually looks pretty bad. Now, it's not a hard rule. That doesn't mean you can't ever do that. And it can sometimes look good. But it's generally something, in general terms, that you want to avoid if possible. So that's basically what we've done over here. We've made sure that when you transition from the oak to the spruce logs, it's on a different plane, a different level of depth, that we push the wall back. Up here, transitioning from the spruce / dark oak, I mean, these are basically the same. There's a little bit of a difference in the texture, but they're pretty much the same colors. So it doesn't jump out too much. When we're transitioning from this dark brown to the lighter brown of the spruce, you can see it's a change in depth. They're not on the same plane. That's sort of what you want to do. And by pushing these back and bringing the top side forward a little bit, you end up with a build that looks much more interesting than this flat one over here. But we can go even further, because there are multiple types of depth. You have horizontal depth, which is what we have on this build, pushing things back, bringing things forward. But there is also vertical depth. If you look at this build, and then you look at this build over here, there's really only one change. And all we did was take this sort of middle section and push it up one block towards the sky, so that we have differing heights on the roof. Oh, and we pulled it out one more block as well. We did both. So yeah, by pulling this middle section forward one more block, and by pushing it up one block, you get something that looks even more interesting than this one over here, because it creates even more sort of visual distinction and points of interest, creates some interesting shapes and things like that. And again, it's very simple. It's the same blocks. It's pretty much the same shapes. We've just played around with things a little bit. So if we go with the progression from start to finish, you've got a flat wall. This is the basic shape if you were to flatten it all together. Then we take the top side and just pull it forward a block, and we take the bottom oak and push it back a block. Then we take the middle section, we pull it forward one more block, and we raise it up one block in elevation towards the sky. And that's how you go from this to this. So if you're building stuff on a flat surface like this, and that includes with the overhang, without the overhang. So many people do the overhang, myself included, because it does look better. But even with just the overhang, if the rest of the build is completely flat, it's still not going to look all that great. So play around with shapes. When you're coming up with builds, mess around with your shapes. Try, start with maybe a flat wall, but then maybe try pulling part of it out or pushing part of it back or adding a little section that sticks out here or there, And you can end up with much better looking builds than if you're to just build everything on one single plane, one flat surface. There are many of examples. This is my Hermitcraft testing world. There are many examples of this and playing around with different shapes. Say, here you've got all sorts of little sections that sort of stick out. On this house, you've got little sections that stick out, window dormers, front sort of entranceway areas. You can see if you're coming up with sections for walls, having bits that stick out. If we look at my Hermitcraft starter house as a good example, there are so many different little depth bits in this house that really are what make this build look good. You've got different levels elevation wise, right? 1, 2, 3 different points of elevation for the roof. If you look at it from up above, you've got multiple levels of depth in the top. This sticks out farther than this, which sticks out farther than this. You've got bits that stick out to the side. You've got little points of interest here, like this bay window, the little window sections. There's all sorts of little things you can do that starting off very simple to sort of take your builds to that next level. And it's not super complicated. And it's really, I think once you kind of understand depth and get shapes that are interesting going, that's really when you start to kind of advance yourself as a builder. And there's nothing wrong with looking at like reference images and trying to replicate those shapes or experimenting or whatever. There's many ways to do it. But once you kind of get the idea of depth, that's when you really start sort of putting things together. So let's just grab some spruce logs. There we go. How could we make this more interesting? This is a flat wall. Well, maybe we could add some windows, right? Nope, that's kind of boring. So maybe we don't add windows. Maybe we add a little dome section, right? Like a little sort of bay window shape here. And maybe that will be our way to get interesting looking wall, an interesting window shape here. So what we could do for that is something kind of like this, and then get just we'll just grab like some white glass panes, and there, now we've got like a little bay window. And that all we did was tweak the shape just a little bit. We just kind of made like a little circular shape sort of sticking out. And I think you would agree that this looks significantly better than this, right? This is much more interesting. And it's such an easy thing to do. Play around with shapes, play around with depth, and your builds will be much better than if you're just building everything on a flat plane like this. So there's your building tip of the day. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, you know what to do. Links in the description below, so check those out as well. Otherwise, my friends, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.